Hello, everybody. This is Joseph P. Farrell with news and views from the Nefarium. It's Wednesday, January 14th, 2015, and I'm a day early this week because I forgot I had some prior commitments on Thursday through Sunday this weekend. So please, if you are members of the website, I have moved Friday's vid chat to next Friday, a week from this Friday. So please bear that in mind. But lots going on in the news. I just did an interview with former Assistant Secretary of Housing and Urban Developments, Catherine Austin Fitts, last night, and we talked about 2015. And I just received this information and I hadn't really had time to look at it when we did the interview, but it goes in line with my thesis that the GMO issue is going to become a hot geopolitical potato. And it looks like it may already be happening. And here's an interesting article that was sent to me by one of the regular members here, Ms. MW, and it was from Nature News, Natural News. The article is titled What They're Not Telling You About Monsanto's Role in the Ukraine. And I want to read some paragraphs, most of the article, in fact, to you, because this goes hand in hand with my thesis that the BRICS nations will make GMOs an issue, and it now appears that we have a little bit more confirmation of this idea. Here's the way the article reads, quote, Monsanto has an office in the Ukraine. And folks, I grant you, I throw in the definite article on the word the Ukraine because that is the proper English usage. There's no reason that we have to pander to political correctness. Monsanto has an office in the Ukraine. While this does not shout culpability from every corner, it is no different than the U.S. military's habit to place bases that they want to gain political control. The opening of this office coincided with land grabs from the IMF and World Bank to one of the world's most hated corporations, all in their support of the biotech takeover. Previously, there was a ban on private sector ownership in the country, but it was lifted just in time for Monsanto to have its way with the Ukraine. Now, listen to this paragraph. In fact, a bit of political maneuvering by the IMF gave the Ukraine a $17 billion loan, but only if they would open up to biotech farming and the selling of Monsanto's poison crops and chemicals, destroying a farmland that is one of the most pristine in all of Europe. Farm equipment dealer Deere, along with seed producers DuPont and Monsanto, will have a heyday. And further down, as reported by the ecologist to the Oakland Institute, whereas the Ukraine does not allow the use of genetically modified organisms in agriculture, Article 404 of the EU agreement, which relates to agriculture, includes a clause that has generally gone unnoticed. It indicates, among other things, that both parties will cooperate to extend the use of biotechnologies. There is no doubt that this provision meets the expectations of the agribusiness industry, as observed by Michael Cox, research director at the investment bank Piper Jaffray. Quote, the Ukraine and to a wider extent Eastern Europe are among the most promising growth markets for farm equipment giant Deere, as well as seed producers Monsanto and DuPont, unquote. The nation was Europe's largest breadbasket, and now, in an act of biowarfare, it will become the wasteland that many U.S. farms have become due to copious amounts of herbicide spraying, the depletion of the soil, and the overall disruption of a perfect ecosystem. The aim of U.S. government entities is to support the takeover of the Ukraine for biotech interests, among other strategies involving the prop up of a failing Kabbalistic banking system that Russia has also refused with its new alignment with the BRICS and its own payment system. This is similar to biotech's desired takeover of the Hawaiian Islands and land in Africa. All right, that's what I wanted to read you now. Let's put this in context because I believe this is a very significant development. and a very revealing story, because I did blog in the last year or previous year about the fact that there were ports on the Sea of Azov that were granted to a lot of these biotech companies to introduce GMOs into the Ukraine. And in response, what we've seen Russia doing increasingly is Russia has called attention to the lack of adequate scientific intergenerational testing of GMOs. And Russia has definitely put the stop on further GMO penetration into that country. And now we have the Ukraine involved. So the GMO issue is hovering in the background here. It's turned into a geopolitical issue. What I suspect this means is you're going to see Russia in the coming year play very hard ball with the GMO issue, pointing this out and using their media organs to point it out to the people in the Ukraine that this issue could very well take the Ukraine's principal export and principal industry, which is agriculture, and turn it into an issue. And it comes also at a time, folks, when there is talk in the European Parliament about allowing each individual nation within the European Union to opt out of the European Union's pro-GMO clause. So in other words, this is also going to be an issue driving some of the internal politics now of the European Union. Now, I find all this very interesting in the light of what I talked about last week in the blog and this week in the blog about how America is seemingly slowly closing bases in Western Europe. And my bet is that this is to position those bases eastward into Eastern Europe, Poland, the Baltic states, Romania, and so on. The reason that the U.S. is doing it, it's a very risky geopolitical strategy, is to have bases able to interdict those energy pipelines into Western Europe, keep Western Europe firmly under the American thumb, and also places American bases closer to the Ukraine for any possible intervention there. So in other words, the GMO may be an issue here, hidden behind the scenes, driving American foreign policy. Now, this article also points out something else very, very interesting, and that is the expansion of GMOs into Africa. And this is also something that we've seen going on. So I really think with this pressure coming from the United States into those regions of the world that have been more or less GMO free up to now, I think this heralds the fact that this year the GMO issue is not only going to remain an environmental and a health issue, but now it's going to be that those issues are going to be used as a wedge, I think, by the BRICS nations, chiefly Russia, to drive the GMO issue as a geopolitical consequence. This also comes at a time that we've seen Russia do something else very significant, and that start its own internal domestic clearing. And I do want to talk about that in future blogs this coming week. Watch for it, because this comes at a time when they've made other similar financial announcements. So when we put all this together, what I'm getting at is you've got domestic financial clearing. We're going to see an expansion of BRICS international financial clearing. The GMO issue has now become a geopolitical issue with the Ukraine. I think this is part of the maneuvering that has been going on behind the scenes with the Russian foreign policy. It's becoming an issue in Europe. And so that means, as far as I'm concerned, that we're watching an interesting development here, because as opposition to GMOs grows in Europe and the pressure continues from the United States, this issue may become a crucial wedge issue that's going to drive Europe further and further away from the United States. So this is going to be a very interesting year. How the United States responds to this is going to determine in large measure the good or ill will that other nations have around the world toward it. This is a very significant development, because it's also pointing out that the IMF and the the World Bank are also in the GMO back pocket. So in other words, the other thing that this action is doing is it's going to call attention to those international financial institutions as being more or less puppets of the West. So in other words, 2015 is going to be a huge propaganda war, and I don't see that this is going to change much. I think we're going to see an uptick in all of the anti-GMO propaganda. There's going to be lots of GMO stories. I'm willing to bet this year we're going to see, pardon me, opposition growing. We're going to see more stories coming out of China about some hesitation with certain particular GMO crops. So this is definitely one to watch. The Ukraine is sitting right in the middle now of this GMO geopolitical issue. And it will be very, very interesting to see whose propaganda is more effective in the Ukraine regarding this issue. My bet is that in this year we're going to see the Russians launch major propaganda efforts with the Ukraine, utilizing their media resources and using the GMO issue to challenge the Ukrainians. Do you really want this kind of agriculture that we see in the United States, that we see in Canada, Australia? Do you want this kind of agriculture, corporate agriculture, coming to the Ukraine? It is a serious issue because many of those farms in the Ukraine are old family farms dating all the way back into the Middle Ages, the kulaks and the peasants prior to the Soviet collectivization. So this is a huge issue, folks. It's not going to go away. So watch this one this year in conjunction with European anti-GMO activity, pro-GMO activity from the American government, American corporations, and probably an uptick in the propaganda coming out of Russia against GMOs, particularly addressed to the Ukraine. That's it for my news and views today. Remember, folks, there is no members vid chat this Friday. I've had to reschedule. I'm going to be out of town for a few days, so if I don't respond to your emails, there's nothing wrong. It's just that I've had a prior commitment come up that I forgot all about, so I've had to reschedule. The news, incidentally, from Georgianne Hughes is I talked with her son recently. She's sleeping a lot, and he told me that sometimes she's sort of, when she is awake, sort of coherent, and then other times isn't. So the news is not good. Continue your prayers for her. And we will see everybody on the flip side. Bye bye, everybody, and God bless.